Everybody seems to be talking about million-dollar HDBs, but I think everyone's looking at the wrong story. Because while celebrating record prices, the data is actually pointing toward something very different. Over the past few years, we've seen the government introduce a series of policies and gradually make changes to the HDB market. On their own, each change might not seem significant, but when you step back and connect the dots, they all appear to be moving towards the same objective. Most people are now talking about the removal of the 15-month wait-out period, and in my next episode, I'll be breaking down exactly what that policy change means, who it affects, and what it could mean for your next property decision. But before we can understand why it was removed, we first need to understand why it was introduced. Because I always tell my clients this, the headlines tell you what happened, but the data tell you what was coming. So today, let's put the headlines aside and follow the data. Because by the end of this video, I don't just want you to understand what the government did. I want you to understand why they did it. So once you understand that, I think you start looking at today's HDB market very differently. So here's the thing. A lot of what the government has rolled out over the past couple of years all points to one direction, stabilizing the HDB market. And I genuinely believe one of their top priorities behind that is eventually relaxing or even removing the 15-month wait-out period for private property owners. For those who are not so familiar, this rule came about in 2022, at a time when HDB resale prices were climbing fast. A big part of that was private owners buying HDB flats in full cash, no loan needed, which pushed up the cash over valuation COV deals across the board. At one point, flats were really almost all selling above valuation. Actually, I remember this very well. Back in 2021 to 2022, I was helping clients sell their EAs and EMs, and buyers back then, right, were so ready to pay COV of about $80,000 to $100,000, just like that, without hesitation. But fast forward to today, and on the ground, it's a completely different story. And I believe if you're selling a larger flat right now, 5-room, even an EA or EM, you might be feeling the same thing. Either you're getting some viewings but no offers, or you're not even getting the viewings in the first place. So with this potential removal of the 15-month wait-out period, things may change. And I want to be upfront about this. Not every unit is going to benefit from this equally. I'll go deeper into that in the next video. So knowing that's how we got here, the government's challenge now is clear. If HDB prices keep climbing and they remove the 15-month wait-out rule at the same time, prices could jolly well go haywire. So the real question is, what exactly is the government doing behind the scenes to keep this in check? So now that we understand why the 15-month wait-out period was introduced, let's look at what has happened over the past few years. Because if the government's objective was to cool the HDB resale market, the question is, has it actually worked? Instead of guessing or listening to opinions, let's look at what the data is telling us. When I was putting this episode together, I noticed 3 very clear trends. Individually, they may not seem like a big deal, but when you put them together, they tell a much bigger story. These 3 trends are also the reason why I believe the recent policy changes didn't happen overnight. The market had already been moving in this direction for quite some time. So let's go through them one by one. Before we continue, if you've been enjoying my property content and would like to support the channel, I'd really appreciate it if you could take a second to like this video and subscribe. My goal isn't just to share what's happening in the market, but to help you understand why it's happening and, more importantly, what it could mean for your own property journey. Everything I'll be sharing today is based on publicly available market news and data and my own interpretation of what the numbers are telling us. Of course, every homeowner's situation is different, so always make decisions based on your own financial circumstances. Now, let's talk about numbers for a second, because this one really surprised me when I saw it. In 2025, HDB resale prices grew up by 2.9% for the whole year. That's the slowest it's grown in almost 6 years, even since before COVID even started. Prices are technically still going up, but just barely. And this 2.9% isn't just a random number. It's actually the lowest we've seen in a long time, so keep it in mind because I want to show you exactly how this compares to the previous years. Now, here's what makes this very confusing. In that very same year, we hit a record number of $1 million HDB transactions, 1,594 of them to be exact. That's more than a 50% jump from 2024, where we only recorded 1,035 $1 million HDB units. So what does this tell us? It tells us that yes, there's a crazy profit happening, but only at the very top end of the market. Meanwhile, the majority of HDB owners are actually seeing their flats barely move in value. Even with all these $1 million HDB deals pulling the average up, the overall market still posted 0% growth in the last quarter. And let's take a look at Q1 to Q3 of 2005. It has been steadily decreasing. Very obvious, you can see the decline every quarter. That on its own is already a very strong signal that the HDB market is entering a very different phase. And then it happened. Q1 2026, HDB resale prices officially dropped down to 0.1%. This is the first price dip in nearly 7 years. Not a slowdown anymore, an actual decline, even when more flats were sold. So, what's actually driving this? Let's start with the BTO supply. Government's original plan was 55,000 BTO units between 2025 to 2027. And recently, they've hinted there could even be more coming. Here's why this matters. Put yourself in a buyer's shoes for a second. If you're looking at a resale flat today, but more BTO options are opening up soon, are you going to just rush into a resale purchase? Most people won't lah, because more choices means less urgency ma. And that's exactly what's playing out right now. Today, if you're a seller selling your HDB flat, you might notice it too. There will be viewings, but the offers just aren't coming in. Sometimes you may even get really lowball offers, or you don't even have much inquiries coming in even. And it's not just BTO supply we need to worry about. There's another wave coming, the increase in supply of MOP units. Between 2021 to 2025, I want you to take a look over here. The government had committed to delivering 100,000 homes. And at one point, there was real doubt whether they will actually hit that number because COVID caused delays with construction materials, manpower, and all these works going on. But they pulled it off. By the end of 2025, all 100,000 homes were delivered. Here's why that matters to us. Once a flat hits its 5-year MOP mark, it becomes eligible to be sold in the resale market, right? So starting this year, we're going to see a steady stream of these flats entering the market year after year. In fact, just in 2026 alone, we are expecting about 13,000 homes to hit MOP. Now, this year alone, you can see over here, over 13,400 HDB homes are expected to hit MOP. And if you break that down by the area, 4 locations that stands out with the biggest incoming wave of supply. For your first one, Punggol North Shore area, Queenstown, which is your Dawson area, and of course, Tampines. So if you own a flat in one of these areas and you're planning to sell, just a heads up, you may be walking into more competition and it might take a bit more patience to get the right offer. So to the sellers that I'm currently marketing your units for sale in this area, please be patient with me, but I'll definitely get it done. So let's sum up everything we've discussed together. Over the last few years, we've seen 3 very clear trends. First, the government has been increasing the BTO supply. Secondly, we're now seeing a growing number of MOP flats entering the resale market over the next few years. Lastly, the resale price index has turned negative for the first time in years. Individually, right, each of these trends tells us something lah. But when you put them together, they point towards one very common outcome. The HDB resale market is becoming more balanced than it was a few years ago. And that's why when the government recently announced the removal of the 15-month wait-out period, I wasn't actually surprised lah. Not because anyone could predict exactly when it would happen, but because the market had already been moving in this direction for quite some time. Now, just to be clear, I'm not saying this is the only reason behind the policy change, but based on the data we've gone through today, I do think that these these are some of the very key market conditions that helped create an environment where such a policy change became possible. And that's why I always recommend my clients not to just react to policy announcements. Try to understand the market conditions behind them, because when you understand why something happens, you're usually in a much better position to plan what to do next. So let's zoom out on the resale HDB price index, and this pattern will feel very familiar. Back in 2013, I want you to take a look over here. That was the last time that the HDB market has hit a real peak. Government responded with cooling measures, the market stabilized and eventually flattened out. Fast forward to today, over here, we are seeing the same signs. You can see that we have also hit our peak in 2025, more supply coming into the market, and prices starting to flatten for the first time in a very long while. It's very, very similar to what had happened the last time we were at peak. So when we put all of this together, I just want to leave you guys with this question. With this amount of supply, right? With this much supply coming into the pipeline, in time to come, do you think the valuation of your flat is heading up or down? I'll leave it to you to decide. So before we wrap up today's episode, I just want to leave you with one final thought. If we take a step back and look at everything that we've discussed today, we're starting to see a very different HDB market compared to just a few years ago. We have slower resale price growth, we have a significant increase in BTO supply, we have more MOP flats entering the resale market over the next few years, and we've also seen one of the key cooling measures, the 15-month wait-out period, being removed. Now, none of these things on their own tells us exactly what will happen next, but together, they tell us that the market is changing. That's why I don't think HDB owners should only look at today's valuation or the latest $1 million transaction. I think it's just as important to ask yourself, what kind of market am I likely to be selling into in the next 3 or even 5 years down the road? Because property planning isn't just about where prices are today. It's about understanding where the market is heading and making decisions before everyone else reacts. That's the real purpose of following the data. And that brings us to the next question. Now that the 15-month wait-out period has been removed, what does that actually mean for homeowners? Does it create new opportunities? Will it change the resale market? And if you're planning your next move, should you be doing anything differently? That's exactly what I'll be covering in the next episode. Now, if you found today's video helpful, I'll really appreciate it if you could like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you like to understand what all of this means for your own property situation, feel free to reach out to me by scanning the QR code here and getting in touch with me, because every homeowner situation is different, and sometimes a simple conversation can give you much more clarity on what your next step should be. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Amanda, and I'll see you in the next episode.